What's going on, guys? So I've covered your Titan and Hunter GM builds, and now lastly here is your Warlocks one. So in this video we'll be going over what I think is one of the best Warlock builds to use in the Grandmaster Nightfalls, which is going to make life hella easy. But before we dive into it, today's sponsor is Awaya, so if you're looking for some cheap, reliable silver in Destiny 2, be sure to check them out and use my code DIVIDE at checkout for a discount. The link is below. But now guys, I hope you've been smashing these GMs out this week for those adept weapons, but if you're struggling, this build may just help you. So as always, rate, comment, subscribe and share, and now let's get on with it. So this build is designed for Grandmaster Nightfalls, and I'd recommend you use it in those GMs or Master Activities that may be quite difficult. But you can use this build in any activity, as it will just be as effective in all types of endgame content where ads are stupidly hard to kill, as this build will just slow and freeze everything, and if everything is frozen then those enemies can't exactly do anything to you. But guys, before we do properly start, if you do like these videos and you want to see more, the full playlist to all these build videos that I've made is below, along with my Discord community server that I'm growing if you're looking for others to play with or you have any questions about the game. But now here in our example Lost Sector, the way you would use this build is firstly hold your grenade to turn it into a stasis turret and then throw it down. This will then slow and freeze ads whilst creating stasis shards, and then picking up those shards will give you small overshields, ability energy, and 2 stacks of Charger Light, which will then activate your Charger Light mod to help you out further. Whilst all this is going on and you're going about your way killing everything, you'll be gaining passive hidden stats that stack on top of your existing base stats, which will then get your turret back even quicker before the current one ends. And overall you'll just be able to run around slowing and freezing everything, which is amazing, especially for endgame content. But that is your overview, so going over to setup now and starting with the loadout, your options are open for whatever you want to use, but I would recommend using weapons that can deal with champions and match game shields, so adjust to what you have available this season. But I'd recommend the anti-barrier autos, unstoppable pulse rifles and unstoppable fusions, simply because we have the particle deconstruction this season that will help you deal more DPS to ads, and overload shouldn't be an issue with this setup that we're running. But if you have easy meltable bosses like the one in the Lake of Shadows Nightfall, then you can use a sword of passive guard to melt them down instantly, but fusion rifles with particle deconstruction should do that job just fine. Now as this is a GM build, I want to go over your exotic choices that you can use in the GMs this season. So starting with the exotic weapons, your choices for the kinetic are Outbreak Perfected, although I'd use this as a last resort. Izanagi's Burden, great for damage against champions. Then in the energy your choices are Aegis Scepter, good to pair with this build but it may be tough to use in a GM. Eriana's Vow, great for barriers. Divinity for overloads. Tiku's Divination, Vex Mythoclast, and Lorentz Driver, amazing energy weapons, but for the heavy, your choices are of course 1000 Voices, Sleeper Simulant, Anarchy, and the Lament. My personal choices would be 1000 Voices, Vex Mythoclast and Eriana's Vow, but I haven't actually used Vex Myth, but I do know it's a top tier exotic from others using it, especially with the particle deconstruction mod this season. But for your exotic armor, we'll be running the Eye of Another World. This highlights priority targets and improves the regeneration speed of your grenade, melee and rift abilities, and guys, this should be a plus 30 hidden passive stat buff to your recovery, discipline and strength. And regardless of hitting 100 stats, it does stack beyond this to 130, which makes your cooldown with the grenade go from 53 seconds to around 45, as this is a passive always active stat from the exotic, which is what makes the exotic really good. But the other exotic choices are Nezarec's Sin, although this requires void kills, which would work well with void weapons like the Null Composure or Lorentz Driver. But the final choice is Verity's Brow, which also requires energy weapon kills to boost grenade damage and recharge rate. These are active buffs rather than Eye of Another World, which is a passive one. So I'd personally go with that, as you're not required to get kills, and will always have those extra stat bonuses. The other good thing about these 3 exotics is that they're all helmets, so you can easily swap between them without moving mods around if you want to use them for different activities. One last exotic I want to point out though is Vesper of Radius. Great exotic that works with your rift, but if you use this, you'll want to use the Frost Pulse aspect in your Stasis Subclass to freeze enemies when you cast that rift. It's actually a pretty fun exotic because you can yeet enemies across the room with it too, but for the sake of this build, we're going with Eye of Another World. But do leave your favourite exotic choices down below for what you'd rather go with. Before we move into the subclass, I will point out that you do need 2 pieces of armour to be stasis, as we are using some new stasis mods, and you will also need 1 piece to be void. If you're a free to play player, don't worry about this too much. I do have an alternative that we will get to soon. So with the subclass, we are using a Stasis Shadebinder, and I've put on a Duskfield grenade, although we won't be using the actual grenade as we will be using it for a turret, as the first aspect we have is Bleak Watcher. This allows us to convert our grenade into a stasis turret that fires slowing projectiles at nearby enemies, along with Glacial Harvest, where freezing those targets creates stasis shards around them, and both of these aspects allow us to slot on 2 fragments each. If you decide to use Frost Pulse, then you will want to avoid using Elemental Well mods. I'd personally only use this if you don't have the Season Pass. But now for the fragments, we have Whisper of Torment. This is to gain grenade energy when we take damage, Whisper of Durance, so that our slows from our abilities last longer, Whisper of Shards, where shattering stasis crystals temporarily boosts your grenade recharge rate, although you can swap this one out if you want to, as it's not really needed. But the last fragment we do have is Whisper of Rhyme, where collecting a stasis shard grants us a small amount of overshield, which falls off after 10 seconds, and collecting additional shards adds to the overshield and refreshes the timer. An amazing fragment to have. Moving on to the armor mods, the very first mod you'll want is Elemental Shards. This will allow stasis shards to count as stasis elemental wells, a new mod introduced this season which works perfectly with our next mod, which is Well of Restoration, another new stasis elemental well mod where picking up that stasis elemental well or shard will give us additional energy for our ability that has the lowest energy. So you'll want to throw your turret down first, then pick up any shards that you find, and this will reduce that cooldown. Next though, we have Elemental Charge to become Charger Light when picking up those shards, but if you're a free to play player, you'll want to use Taken Charge and Shield Break Charge, and just scrap the Elemental Wells altogether, but using those Charger Light stacks we will gain significant damage resistance against enemies when our shields are destroyed, using Protective Light, as this is the next mod. If you don't have this, your alternative mod is High Energy Fire, or even Firepower, but that is all you really need for your Charger Light and Elemental Well mods. So for your normal mods, starting with a helmet, you want your Ammo Finder mod for your heavy weapon, then for the gauntlets we have our champion mods that you may need, and you will have enough points to slot on all the mods that you do need. You won't need to worry about overloads, so if you have barriers and unstoppables, slot these on, but if you have overloads and something else, remove the one that you don't have, and slot on a grenade kickstart mod if possible. This will help you get your grenade back even faster. For the chest though, we have Concussive Dampener to reduce area of effect damage, as we will get completely melted by bosses with splash damage in a GM, and this will help you out quite a lot. And then we do have our Ammo Reserve mod for a heavy weapon on top of that. For the legs we have our Solar Ability cooldown mod that will reduce the grenade cooldown when picking up Orbs of Power, as with this build we want to be able to throw those turrets down as much as possible. And alongside this, we have a Scavenger mod for again that heavy weapon. But lastly for the class, we have Thermoclastic Strike. This is to stun those overloads with our stasis melee, and stunning them will give us that melee ability straight back. Just don't miss because you will screw yourself over, as we're not a melee build, so you will be waiting a little longer than usual. But if you don't have overloads in the activity you're playing, then use this mod right here to gain stasis energy when a champion gets stunned, along with particle deconstruction if your team isn't using it. Great mod all round, as you will be able to weaken enemies with fusion rifles for extra DPS. Now for the stats, you of course want to max out that discipline to 100, and then recovery as well, so you can use your turrets and rifts as much as possible. But here is your artifact setup as always, and yours may look slightly different, as you may need to make a few adjustments to unlock some mods for different things to suit your own playstyle. But overall this build is in my opinion one of the best Warlock builds in the game for endgame content, like Master and Grandmaster Nightfalls. I probably wouldn't use this in a raid, as usually in raids, survivability isn't the issue. It's usually encounter puzzles and DPS, so you want to maximise damage in raids, but for Nightfalls, you really want to stay alive more, and this will help you do just that by freezing literally everything in your path with those infinite stasis turrets. But guys, that is all for this new Warlock Stasis Grandmaster Nightfall build in Destiny 2 Season of the Lost, using the new Stasis Elemental Wells. Next you should check out the playlist for more top fun builds to use in Destiny 2 2021, and as always, give this one a try and let me know what you think, and guys, I'll catch you all very soon for the next one. Stay tuned.